Hi, my name is Ryan Louie, and this is Affinder's Fall 2020 Quarterly Update. So let me give you a little background on our project. So as AI and context-aware technologies have an enormous potential to be helpful and responsive within many daily situations. And in this, my current interests are exploring this potential within the domain of facilitating socially connecting shared experiences at distance. For example, I'm really excited about how technology might identify shared situations when family members living apart could eat together, for example. And see, to do this, designers of these experiences must first articulate the elements of the shared situations that affords engaging in this shared experience. And so here's one example is what kinds of shared situations would allow people from different parts of the world to grab a big bite and kind of connect through this type of shared activity. And the second is that they have to represent their concept for a shared situation using available machine context features. And that's because AI technologies need to be able to detect and identify these situations. So this might look like recognizing that, someone can take a big bite when you're eating with food that requires eating with your hands, holding up a big sandwich to your face. And second, well, once you know that, it's identifying and trying to understand, well, how do I represent that concept in a way that machines can understand using features like Yelp place categories. So while that's fine and dandy, the struggle here is that constructing machine representations of a conceptually rich situation is not easy. The ways we have to do this include labeling examples to train machine learning models, but this is costly and you might ask people, a crowd, what are the last places you went to that could be good places to have a big bite? But this is, again, ineffective. And the second is programming directly with context features. A designer could say, well, for big bites, it could be sandwiches, and they'd look for features with sandwiches, and that's the case. But they might also think, well, really the more abstract idea is eating with your hands, and they look for that type of feature, but there's no such feature for that. And they really will miss other features relevant to the concept if they just program directly with features. So towards this goal of being able to support people, designers, to be more effective at designing these collective experiences, we created a tool called Affinder. And it's a tool for expressing concepts for a situation to machines. And this interface is different than just programming with features because it provides an environment to really think through how a high-level situation, so in this example, a high-level situation could be decomposed into smaller concepts. And then these smaller intermediate concepts can be the links to the actual features. And people can forge for those features based on their conception. And finally, once they identify those features, they can compose a representation that integrates their different concepts of a situation. So with Affinder, I continued my work with Affinder this fall. And in doing so, I tested Affinder on different concept expression tasks towards the goal of identifying remaining challenges, as well as to prototype new design characteristics based on these challenges. And you could summarize my findings in two ways. One, the remaining challenge I had identified was that conceptually stretching people's representations. So that's the idea that yeah, conceptually stretching, it doesn't just relate to forging for features. Um, but you must actually do some of the conceptual stretching at the declaring of concepts level. And I'll get into what that means. Second, stretching intermediate concepts requires techniques that supporting generating concepts at more general and specific levels. And I'll tell you a little bit about the literature behind how we can do that. So this quarter, I'll elaborate that my testing um, involved going to participants, other designers, and just testing myself. And all of all of us played the role of a social experience designer. And what we were doing was we were thinking about shared experiences at distance and thinking about what kind of context can a person be in to participate in those experiences, such as like grabbing a big bite. And our goals as a designer is to encode the variety of contexts in which the situation can take place. So this is stretching the representation to include places that are not just sandwich shops, but where else could other people take a big bite? Because that could include more people into the experience. And then second, one's goal is to actually encode contexts which are relevant to the concept and really afford actions. And I won't go too much in detail in this presentation on that second goal. I'll focus mainly on finding that variety of contexts and conceptually stretching. So my testing methods, as I mentioned, I recruited designers and to do these types of tasks. And what tasks am I talking about? Well, yes, we're encoding situations that afford a shared activity for interacting at distance. But I think it's important to see the diversity of kinds of situations we're thinking about. I took inspiration from collective experiences I've already designed, such as this Big Bites photo. We're thinking about what ones in which people could do a shared kind of activity or do a particular activity in their environment, like throw a paper airplane, where awesome places to throw a paper airplane. And finally, thinking about experiences which are a little bit more abstract and that afford different activities but are unified in one theme. So what imagine designing a shared experience where people are enjoying fun winter activities and it's uniting people across this um, unifying experience, but in which they're participating in different activities such as skiing, eating hot chocolate, or sitting by a fireplace. I have a few, and finally, when people went about these expression tasks, I recorded their process and was thoughtful about analyzing their final construction to see whether they forgot to include relevant features, or as they were going, they got stuck and could not represent part of their original concept. So that's how I did the test. Those are the methods. Now, before this quarter, my claim was that Affinder's unlimited vocabulary for searching features can help with discovering relevant features and even shift the notions of a concept. Really, we'd want people, designers, when using Affinder, to overcome this problem of underscoping, in which a creator recalls some features like sandwiches for a big bite, but forgets other relevant features such as wraps, burgers, burritos, all types of categories, place categories in which you could get a big bite. And the argument was that when people are foraging for features, they can start with a specific instance, any conception they have, discover relevant features when searching using this unlimited vocabulary, and then shift their notions of a concept based on some of the features they encounter. I'll illustrate this with an example. So sandwiches are the first thing that come to mind for a big bite. And by foraging for features, it will both find features that align with that concept, such as delis. You can get a sandwich at delis, but also encountering features might shift the notions. And that is the way in which people can conceptually stretch. So a designer might encounter wraps, which is a very different form factor than the sandwich I might have thought about. But wraps could inspire a wrap, which is maybe like tortilla wrapped and more cylindrical, could inspire concepts like burritos. And wraps can even, just as a concept, be used to further search, which could bring about new features. And people can repeat this iterative process to really conceptually stretch and represent their ideas. Now, that was the claim, but I found that stretching representations in this way can easily fail if none of the list of features that are returned shifts a designer's notion. So this process fails when really they start searching, their conception is very specific. A very specific instance of the high level concept. So if we're thinking about an experience in which people are trying, maybe an experience like a winter day experience in which people are curling up next to a fireplace, maybe it's something about that as a shared experience that a designer wants to capture. Fireplace might be too specific, and maybe there's only a few places, few context features in which you can actually find a fireplace. So here, none of the features, you can see many of the features are irrelevant. They're features in which you could buy fireplaces but not actually find a fireplace. And because many of them are irrelevant, none of them fail to shift the notions of a concept in the direction that is important to this designer. So it can be difficult. And what I found in my testing was that people kind of give up on concepts like this. They might not even include this idea of a fireplace. So it raises this question about what method can a designer use to overcome this, what the literature calls fixation on their initial concept, and help them shift their notions so that they can create a representation for maybe something like curling up next, for this experience of curling up next to a fireplace or similar experiences like that. And so I think to overcome this fixation, we can adapt concepts from this field of analogical reasoning to shift their notions of a shared situation for a shared experience. So what do I mean? Well, one person from analogical reasoning starts with abstracting and trying to go beyond the surface level features. So what would that look like for for this problem? Well, abstracting a situation might be asking a designer, really, what aspects of the situation that contain like common object affordances or that afford similar actions across situations provide the shared context for interacting. And then second, finding analogs or finding other relevant or diverse situations that this could happen. So what would that look like? So abstracting the situation representation could be investigating what curled up near a fireplace, what makes that a good shared experience? Well, maybe it's that people are gathered around some source of heat, like gathered around a fireplace, or maybe it's the actual activity of curling up near a fireplace. So it's this idea of like cozying up, your body really cozying up maybe in a small space or a warm place in one's environment. Or it could be enjoying the calm flicker of the fire or hearing the crackling of the firewood. Maybe that aspect of the experience is really important. So thinking about those different dimensions of concepts can be now an abstract representation to help think of what are other contexts in which this could happen. For example, if it's the gathered around some source of heat, that's the real element that's exciting. A creator can use that abstraction to think, well, maybe it's other people gathering around in a hot tub could also be this fun winter activity. Um, so the main takeaway here is that thinking about concepts and navigating concepts at different abstraction levels um, is going to really help. So one technique to help do this navigation of abstraction between concepts comes from this work on designing by analogy. And what they did was that they recommended that you should translate the problem that you're working on into some representative verb. So for us, that could be, well, curling up next to a fireplace. Maybe it's curling up, or maybe it's warming up. And then from here, the idea is to find more general and specific words related to that um, in order to populate this map or tree, if you will, of concepts that could be um, similar but diverse to help people think about analogies to the situation. And finally, um, they could stretch their concept based on the domain usage. So one example is warming up. Another verb for warming up could be thawing. And I could think of thawing, like what do I thaw things? Well, maybe in a hot water. And thinking about hot water, it could be, well, maybe a hot tub, right? So there might be something here where people are bouncing between objects that afford these actions and actions that enable a shared activity. Um, Another technique from this domain comes from leveraging databases that link concepts at different abstraction levels, such as WordNet. And we tested this a little bit and found that WordNet can be sometimes quite effective. On the right, there's this example of taking a word like sandwich and finding many related words of the same abstraction. And it surfaced other surprising words like euro or wrap or hot dog or hamburger. And all of these could be inspiring objects, which you could still grab a big bite. Now, one of the limitations is that this conceptual hierarchy isn't always aligned with how a creator breaks down their concept expression. So it's really just a source of inspiration. Um, and I think the next steps here are to use WordNet to assist in finding more general and specific concepts, but in the verb domain, that they were suggesting that WordNet could be really helpful there. But I think we're still going to have that limitation around creators matching their concepts to this more system represented concepts. One other insight was when I was from my studies was that I did a couple tests with this more abstract expression task, places to do fun activities on a cold day. And one thing to note is that there's many different activities one can do. Playing in the snow, or ingesting a hot beverage, or gathered around with others around a heat source. And I think brainstorming other activities is a fundamentally different task. And I found that these types of methods, especially things like the word tree or the, what did we call this? The WordNet database, kind of failed in helping us navigate this concept space. I think the implication is that I might have to scope the expression tasks that I give to designers. I think ones that are too general, fun winter activities, won't be effective, but ones in which really describe the specific shared context or experience, activities or actions that you're doing are a lot better. So I'd like to discuss um, the takeaways from this quarter and illustrate the next steps as it relates to conceptual stretching. So we saw that my current design argument that a finder's unlimited vocabulary for foraging for features can be effective is true. A finder is effective at helping discover relevant features, and in some cases can coincidentally shift notions of a concept. However, that success depends on what vocabulary designers use to search, and that which is really limited by their fixation to initial concepts. Um, to overcome fixation and find other concepts, we can use methods from designing or innovating by analogy that helps designers generate more general and more specific ideas. This is thinking about more abstract representations and finding analogous situations. For my future work, I like to do more design and evaluation that will study which techniques will be sufficient and effective for overcoming fixation and declaring more diverse concepts, which can then be used as search terms in the foraging for feature process. I hope to find which ones are effective while also allowing the overall process to be a natural opportunistic construction process that a finder already supports. Thanks.